companies spend approximately 500% more on marketing than their actual sustainable practice.
It's just BS, that you're not doing good for the world. You need to remember you're talking to human beings. You're not talking to robots. You're not talking. If we do lose hope, we have nothing left. That's kind of what keeps me going. What makes leaders not care about sustainability? It would be ego.
And is McDonald's sustainable? Because you haven't answered that question.
This is Create What Matters.
Hi everyone, my name is Leticia and this is Create What Matters. And here today, we're gonna go beyond the surface and we're gonna dive deep into stories, strategies, storytellers, and maybe change makers ourselves who are rewriting the rules of impact.
Hey there, I'm Ale and welcome to one more session of Create What Matters. We're looking at impact beyond profit. We have an amazing guest today. We're gonna be talking about creativity, greenwashing, storytelling, all in the realms of impact. Very excited to be doing this. Welcome, Sarah. It's lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining us on this session. Very excited to kick it off right now.
Thank you for having me.
Oh. Get ready for a conversation that will challenge everything you thought you knew about impact, storytelling, and the power of genuine communication. And
our guest today is Sarah Heaney, a professional who has transformed her journey from nutrition studies to becoming a powerhouse in sustainability communication. I actually know her because I tried hiring her for a project looking for a female creative that was versed in sustainability, and she was the best we could find. Always being blown away by her experience, her expertise, and especially her mission in terms of working towards a better and more novel communication. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
so, Sarah, before we dive into the world of sustainability itself, I know that you've worked on a coffee farm in Nicaragua, taught English in Colombia, and now you're transforming how businesses communicate impact. What's the wildest story from those travels that shaped your current mission?
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks for having me. So I would say my main highlight from those travels were when I was on the coffee farm, actually, in Nicaragua. So I was volunteering there. It was part of a social charity organization that help farmers feel empowered. So they do this by getting a collection of farmers who may be working on quite toxic environments, on farms where there's a lot of bullying, even drugs and alcohol are on the farm. And they're very much in their own world and not connected with the outer society. So what this charity did was take these farmers, introduce them to a really sustainable, welcoming farm that practiced permaculture practices. And they invited volunteers like myself to speak to the farmers, open them up to another world. There was even a particular farmer who said that the first time a volunteer went to visit the farm, he couldn't even make eye contact with the volunteer because he was so shy and not used to speaking to other people apart from farmers. So yeah, this organisation is doing great stuff to empower these farmers, as that kind of really drove my mission to focus on not only environmental impact, but also social impact as well.
I love that we're starting with something unexpected. Sarah, give us that one moment that was a lightning bolt of inspiration for you. You've had all of these experiences. If you could choose one moment of these, what would that one be?
So yeah, aside from the farming experience, kind of a few years before that, I was more focused in the nutrition and food side of things. And more I was realizing how unsustainable the food industry is. There was a big boom in 2020, predominantly because of the COVID pandemic, which made a lot of industries kind of rethink the way they're producing their food or other industries. And yeah, more and more food companies were coming out and speaking about their sustainability efforts, which made me even more interested in food and thinking, okay, what are they actually doing about this? Mm-hmm. Is this authentic? Is it not? And then I started experimenting and researching with this topic more and more. I started my Instagram page at the time, Impact Food Brands, which is kind of my brand name as well now, to empower the food brands that were doing well. And that kind of really kicked off my journey in sustainability and food.
I come from the food industry myself, having worked in Pepsi for many years. And I'm curious to see, because your thesis was branding project that talked about the food industry, in this case McDonald's. Could you speak a little bit of that experience and what that project was like?
Yeah, sure. So when I was studying my master's in marketing, I was working for a sustainability consultancy at the time, and they were working exclusively with the food industry. So it really gave me exposure to how the food industry works and how they're more and more involved, as I mentioned earlier, with rethinking of their business models and transforming them into more sustainable models. One of our biggest clients was a big meat manufacturer, which made me kind of question how sustainable can meat actually be. Obviously, McDonald's is one of the biggest producers of meat globally, and it's one of the most recognized brands worldwide. So I kind of wanted to put two and two together and see, okay, most people love McDonald's. You don't.
I've actually had fast food for the first time in 10 years, 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's
Yes.
impressive.
For the very first time.
Yes.
I mean, I'm also not the biggest fan, but when I did my survey, most people were consuming McDonald's various times a month, which for me is quite shocking because I would have it every other month. Not every other month, kind of months and months not eating fast food, or even years for yourself, which is really impressive. But yeah, basically, I wanted to challenge this and see, are McDonald's truly sustainable? Because they do have a lot of sustainability communications out there. And is their sustainability communications effective? So when the consumers look at their sustainability comms, do they believe it? Do they trust them? And does that make them want to eat more at McDonald's or not? So that was kind of the focus of my thesis.
And how did you go by it? Like, what was your approach to understanding it?
Yeah, so I did a deep dive of McDonald's social media strategy. So I looked at their posts from the past year. I focused it on McDonald's UK. I also did a deep dive of their website and looked at out-of-house marketing as well. And basically analysed all of their sustainability content and divided it in 4 pillars, which are connected to their sustainability report. So basically it's all kind of a multi-channel approach of their sustainability communications. And I presented these to the people who I was interviewing and asked them, after each piece of content, do you believe that McDonald's are sustainable? And then I asked them at the end of the survey, has this changed your point of view? Do you think McDonald's are sustainable or not? And why? And really interestingly, after each individual piece of content, people would believe that McDonald's are sustainable and doing a good thing. However, at the end of the survey, they would say, no, I don't believe them. Even though they'd say yes for the past five questions, at the end they would say, no, they're not sustainable. When I asked why, it's because they don't trust them. So that's the element of greenwashing coming in. So they know that they're talking about what they're doing, but they don't really trust them.
They don't ultimately believe them.
Exactly.
That is true. Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting that that gap between communication versus actual belief, and even if you provide reasons to believe, which is something we do in communications. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. According to a 2024 Global Sustainability Report, companies spend approximately 500% more on marketing their sustainability efforts than their actual sustainable practice. So more about talking than walking. So you made it your mission to fight greenwashing. What is greenwashing to begin with? And what was that moment you realized that most sustainability communication is basically corporate fiction?
Yeah, great question. So greenwashing is basically kind of what you asked in the question. So am I actually doing good for the people on the planet, or am I just talking about doing good, however, doing something else in the background? So kind of hiding what you're actually doing. So an example of this could be, for instance, a company which are doing a huge sustainability marketing campaign about planting trees, for instance, to give back to the planet, absorb carbon emissions. This is also known as carbon offsetting, so when you're kind of taking back your carbon emissions by planting more trees. However, in the background, they're actually investing in oil and in coal, and they're not actually doing as good as what they seem to be doing. What was the second question?
The second question is, what was the moment that you realized that most sustainability communication is basically fiction and this movie-like theory?
Another way to put it.
There was a moment.
Yeah, so I feel like it's been quite gradual, but there's been moments where I've looked at websites literally for coal investing or oil or that kind of industry. And their website landing page is plants and loads of, the ocean and invest in green. And it's just BS. Like, you're not doing good for the world. Why are you portraying that you are? So that was a big kind of, because I was never obviously in that sector. I've always been in food, and I guess you do get a bit blindsided by it once you're so deep in it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you start looking at other sectors, you're like, wait a minute. Like the ones that are obviously not green, when you see that, you're like, whoa, okay.
The contradiction is very clear, essentially.
Yeah. So that was probably one of the big moments for me.
And how do we help people, or how do we ourselves understand these claims are marketing fiction, and how do we begin to cut through this disinformation and misinformation, because both of them can happen at the same time?
As consumers, you mean?
Yeah, as consumers, regular human beings, that are not connected to this narrative or to this.
Yeah, of course. So I would say it's really important to look up companies. As you said, regular human beings. If we're using consumers as an example, when you're at a supermarket, you don't really have that much time to decide what you're going to buy. I think there's studies that say it's even a matter of seconds when you decide what to pick up from a shelf. So as human beings, as regular beings, we're not used to actively researching brands and understanding, are they authentic? Are they actually sustainable? So you are likely to feel like you're being greenwashed, because if you see a beautiful packaging, all green, loads of plants on it, and it says eco-friendly, you're like, oh, great. So it's bound to happen. So if you do actively want to make a difference, I would say start with research. My second point would be follow brands over a long period of time. So there are brands, as I mentioned earlier, that will do a huge marketing campaign around sustainability just because they see that it's the hot topic at the moment, or they're seeing they've got a peak in sustainable consumers, but they are purely doing it just for profit or for getting more visibility. I would say, rather than buying in the moment and believing in those brands because of this particular campaign at a particular time of their whole existence, follow them over time and see, are they actually carrying on with this, or was this just something that they shot out in a big marketing campaign? So those would be kind of my main points for that.
I think there are some examples of reports. I've studied a lot of reports in the last years, especially in the visualization area, and I love one that says they are very upfront in their message. So there's one, I think it's from an alternative to milk company. And then they, on the front of their report, they usually say like, this year we sucked. Or then this year we did better. We actually achieved our goals. Like, they're very upfront with it, and they even like joke around with it in a way, very transparent, but even like making fun of themselves. Like, we did not do well this year, or we barely made the minimum. And I appreciate that a lot as a customer, because it translates really well for me. I don't have to go through 10 pages of tables to understand how they did. They are just giving it to me up front.
Yeah.
I understand that I can trust someone that is able to criticize themselves. And I think that's a big problem, is that I see a lot of companies, and I don't know if you agree with this, trying to justify their actions all the time instead of owning their shit, with all due respect. And just saying like, we sucked at this, and we were not as good as we thought we could be with this information, and we can do better. Or we're not going to focus on that because we have other things to focus on.
Which is interesting, something to mention here, that is called the prop-fall effect. It's a behavioral economics principle that when you are honest or even self-deprecating and truthful, people relate to you more. So it's actually, however, mind you, it's an artifact or a tactic that in marketing, at least in digital marketing, I teach this, it's used to manipulate as well.
Of course.
Brands know this.
Yeah.
So I just, let's take it with a grain of salt as well, because as a marketeer, I also have given this advice. So it's a tool that can help manipulate, as it is other tools such as putting a stamp of having TripAdvisor, or you are in Oprah magazine or Lonely Planet. All of those things that make our brains go to the shortcuts to decide in those very few seconds we have.
Yeah.
So I actually love behavioral economics and all of these tools, but I think that they're also part of greenwashing, and marketeers, we all know that we can use this for goals, right? But are those goals, walking the talk of the companies actually doing what they're saying or not?
And to follow up on that, I'm pretty sure I know which brand you're talking about. And I have an interesting story related to what you're both saying. So I think it was in 2020, actually, when kind of my interest started, a vegan milk brand who are really well known for their kind of positive impact, also their clever marketing as well. They have a really loyal customer base because of all of this marketing that they do, and they make you feel like you're connected to the brand. So when something goes wrong, consumers get very angry. Yeah. So something happened in 2020 where they were found that they were associated with an investor, which was investing in fossil fuels. So they got a massive backlash. But as you said, they're very good at communicating and being transparent when they have done something wrong. So they then did a campaign kind of explaining why this happened and so on. And then kind of the consumers came back. But it saw their kind of consumers go down quite quickly after that happened.
And I think that's something that I wanted to touch on real quickly, which is, at the end of the day, I feel like having these conversations, it always boils down to us being responsible for doing the work. As consumers, not as corporations, because I'm also a company. But I feel sometimes it's always up to us to call out on the BS, to be the ones to identify, to follow the brands, as you said. Like, what is your take on responsibility? Because it's like, how much can we actually do versus how much they listen. And I know that there is strength in the mass and there's power in the mass, but at the same time, it's not fair, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to understand your perspective on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think it should be down to consumers to change the world. Like at the end of the day, we do have the power, but we don't have all of the power. These big corporates have the power. So they really need to be the ones who instigate the change. But obviously, if they don't have the pressure from the consumers, if they're still getting a lot of demand for a product which isn't very sustainable, then obviously they're not going to shift. So that's hence the power of consumers and what we buy and what we don't buy. But it must be a systemic approach. So it can't just be the consumers. It can't just be the corporates either. It has to be policymakers. It has to be the farmers. It has to be the whole supply chain, which needs to change. And obviously that's going to take years and years. Yeah, that's why I'm really passionate about what I do, because I want to help drive that change. And I know I'm only a tiny little piece in the huge puzzle, but I feel like we all add together and we can all make impact if we come together.
Yeah, and on that note, given that this is your mission, if storytelling is the antidote to greenwashing, which is I know a lot of what you do, building narratives and creating new stories that are connected and putting in place frameworks so brands can start being more cohesive and coherent with what they're doing and what they're communicating. What makes a truly transformative narrative, and how are you helping brands make this happen? How do you help them go from performative communication to this genuine impact to cohesive and coherent and truthful storytelling?
I think it's all about knowing how to be authentic and not just use it as a marketing tool, like genuinely be authentic, which is really hard unless you connect the emotional side of yourself as an individual and as a company. So you need to remember you're talking to human beings. You're not talking to robots. You're not talking to, yet, maybe in a few years. Yeah, so understanding that people are people and we have emotions. So if you want to drive change, you need to connect with people's emotions. Another thing I would say is something that is really popular and does have a positive, a lot of impact, not necessarily positive, more in the B2C kind of things, is experience marketing. So experience marketing is when you show a piece of marketing for example, an activity rather than the product, which drives some kind of emotion in the viewer. So for instance, Red Bull do this really well. A lot of their commercials are about skydiving or a lot of adrenaline rushing sports, because they're trying to say, if you have Red Bull, this is how you feel. So I think experience marketing can be used for good as well. And I really try and encourage that in sustainability marketing as well, and positive impact. And also in the B2B sector, I feel like B2B, business to business, usually can be a bit dry and a bit corporate and very technical. Yeah.
So boring.
Yeah. So I'm trying to make it more sexy. And we need to get inspired by B2C marketing and B2B and use it for positive change.
And you come from the UK, but you've lived in Spain since you were a child. You've also traveled around the world. What are the different cultural aspects in narrative and in storytelling that you see? And can you give us examples of like what would work in one place but wouldn't in another? And does that impact a lot?
Yeah, good question. So in the UK, we love sarcasm, as you probably know.
Really? I didn't know.
She's dating someone.
Yeah,
You have really good dark humor.
Yeah, we're very good. Yeah, as you said with the example earlier, kind of self-deprecating. So talking badly about ourselves, but in a humorous way. So that works really well in the UK and other cultures that have a similar culture to that one. I'm not sure if that would work that well in Spain. I feel like some elements of the culture are quite similar, but not really. In Italy, they're slightly more sarcastic, so maybe it would work quite better there. But yeah, it's really interesting comparing different countries and cultures and how language has such a massive impact. And yeah, you need to be careful with how you communicate things and who you're communicating them to.
And would you also say that the level of transparency is different in different places? What being transparent for someone, for a Finnish person and a Brazilian or American, for example, I feel like it would be completely different.
Yeah, 100%. I would say naturally a lot of cultures like Spanish or kind of Southern European or maybe also Latin American, much more open and transparent naturally as people, because we like to invite people in.
I have my doubts, but yes.
No?
I don't know, I have my doubts. But anyway.
Depends. In Spain, I'll use Spain as an
course.
example. Whereas in the UK, everything is much more regimented, I would say, and maybe more closed. Obviously, this is just generalizing. It depends on the person.
Of course.
So this probably trickles down into businesses as well, and how open they are and how many levels of approvals you have to go through before sharing a piece of information with someone, which has an impact on the transparency as well. But I haven't fully investigated it yet, so maybe something to look into.
Understand different ways in which, not McDonald's necessarily, but other brands communicate depending on where they are globally. Yeah, for sure.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Agree.
Sarah, let's get uncomfortable. Let's go on a different direction. We are facing potential civilization challenges as a society with climate change, biodiversity loss, and systemic inequalities. But instead of this doom and gloom narrative, I would like to know what gives you unreasonable hope beyond the performative optimism you've made telling stories and helping brands build this impact-driven narrative. What gives you hope, if it's fair to say that you have hope to create a better world and transformation through these stories?
I'd say it's very hard to have hope, especially in the current geopolitical landscape. Understandably, a lot of people are losing hope, especially when it comes to sustainability and ESG topics.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of backtrack all over the world, understandably because of the current situation. However, if we do lose hope, we have nothing left. That's kind of what keeps me going. And I feel like if I don't have hope and if I'm not going to inspire people to make change, then, you know, what's the point? Then it's all kind of, it has a waterfall effect, I would say. If I'm inspiring one person, even if it's just one person, I feel like they can inspire someone else, and then it kind of trickles. So yeah, I think it's really important to keep hope, even when you feel like there is a lot of doom and gloom. I'd also say something important is the way you speak to people. So rather than blaming or making people feel scared or guilty for what they're doing, especially big corporates, I mean, there is an element with big corporates that are ruining the world where you do need to be a bit activisty and be like, no, you're doing wrong. However, when it actually comes down to speaking to the person and when you're getting to the point where you're talking about, okay, how can I shift my strategy to one that has more of a positive impact? You need to be really understanding, not blaming them, not making them feel bad. You need to adapt to their current situation and take baby steps. I'm not talking about baby steps of releasing missions and targets from 10 years in 10 years' time, which you might not even achieve. I'm talking about small targets in the next few years that you can actually achieve. So yeah, baby steps, and be careful with what you say.
Is there a particular case or project that you're proud of where you've been helping them get to that place? Because I know for a fact that when you're starting to navigate these paths with clients who might be very new at this, or with new projects that are not very mature, it is a long hike. Is any example emerging for you that comes to your mind right now that you want to share with us?
Yeah, so there's a business that I've worked with who came to me to help them with their brand. They wanted to put sustainability front and center, like a lot of brands do. But I had to kind of say, no, it's not the case. I want you to be authentic. I don't want this to be greenwashing. So rather than putting sustainability front and center, it's still part of their strategy, but they're not targeting sustainability professionals at the end of the day. They're targeting a different audience. And yeah, you need to be strategic and tactical about it. You will make change, but you have to do it in a kind of step-by-step approach rather than this radical sustainability optimism, which isn't going to make change. Obviously, if you are a really impactful brand, then that is authentic to you. But if that's not the case, then yeah, there's different ways of going around it.
We talked about hope, we talked about positivity, but I think that also in this sense, positivity has been used a lot in a way that we are like, it's kind of like mainstream for us now. We see it also as fake in a way, in a world where people are losing hope, and in a world where this kind of has been weaponized in a way to cause more misinformation. How do you cut through this meaninglessness? And how do you not become just one more frame in the wall as a brand talking about sustainability? What is authenticity in this case?
Rather than making it all about the talking, it's about the doing. That's what authenticity is for me. So rather than spending loads of money on a huge marketing campaign around your sustainability efforts, which may not even be true, as we mentioned earlier with the greenwashing, really look first at your strategy. What are you actually doing to be impactful? And then learn how to communicate that. Also, as I said, connect with the consumer, connect with the reader, understand their story, and tell their story. Make it less about yourself, more about the consumer and the reader.
What is the bad impact, or what is the bad outcome of greenwashing? Because I think we talk a lot about it, but like, what can happen if I just do a lot of greenwashing?
It makes the bad companies bigger, I guess. So
Okay.
a lot of, I mean, bad is a very generic term, but the companies that may not be doing as good and are having negative impacts on people and the planet, if they are greenwashing, people don't know about it, there's no transparency, and they get away with it. So then they get more profit, they get bigger, and then they're having even worse impacts on people on the planet. And then, yeah, it's kind of a domino effect.
Snowball.
A snowball. Yeah. And if we wanted to diagnose this communication crisis, not the strategic wound or the professional analysis, but what is behind the human vulnerability that is making the leaders leading these companies, at the head of these companies, create communications the way they do. If we had to look back at that, raw terror or mindset beneath this greenwashing and performative sustainability approach, what would that be? What is the mindset of a leader in a company that is taking this approach? Is it politics? Is it a status quo? According to you, what is that hidden fear, but very strong fear that leaders are being led to make these decisions? What's your take here?
I would say, if I had to say in one word or one emotion, what makes leaders not care about sustainability or not act, it would be ego. So a lot of corporates want to look good, want to look like they're doing really well, and a lot of that comes down to money and how well they're performing. That's what drives businesses. We all know that. So if they have a lot of ego, all they're going to care about is making profit. And a lot of times there is a trade-off between sustainability and profit. There is evidence that says that if you do invest in sustainable practices, you do make better returns later down the line because you're more resilient as a company. And in the definition of sustainability, which I think a lot of people have forgotten what it actually means now, it is about staying alive, let's say, or keeping your business going for longer. So naturally, if you are sustainable, you will stay for longer and then it's better for your business. But in the short term, obviously, if you get a CEO who's might only be a CEO for the next 5 years, they only care about making profit now, looking good to the head of whatever, and to the board, and that's what drives them. So
And that's a lot of the world that we live in, right? Like lots of ego drives it.
it's a lot of masculine energy. I like to say everyone needs to connect more with their feminine side, connect with their emotions and understand people and connect with people, connect with your creative sides as you're doing. Creativity is such a positive thing in the world, and I believe that creativity can drive real positive change. Any gender, connect with your feminine side, I would say.
And is McDonald's sustainable? Because you haven't answered that question.
It's a tricky question.
You can leave it off the record if you want. We can delete this scene later.
We won't.
I'll leave that one.
You can say that we have to read your thesis to get to that. We can upload your thesis in the show notes.
Well, my thesis is more about the perception.
I know.
I think silence says a lot.
I think so too.
And it is fair. I've worked like you. I've seen it from the inside. The sustainability practices, the greenwashing. It's part of a system, right? It's the way it works. Sometimes it's ignorance. Even if you have that feminine energy, even if you have the values to wanting to drive change from the inside. I've tried that. I've been in that position where I can change this from the inside. I'm going to create better products that are better for people and that are going to do well, because that is kind of like ego in a way. I am going to do this. Yeah. And then not understand that there's a system that works this way and there's like a playing field, and we need to understand the rules of that playing field and how much we can go in terms of our control, how far beyond we can go, and in this sense understand what is our zone of influence where we can actually activate change. I do become very inspired by people that are activists and that are entrepreneurs within a company who are pushing, but I've also been in the field where the leaders and the system is telling you no, and you potentially have to step away and then create your own thing. And I'm very, very inspired by these leaders. For example, I know the case for Coconut, which is a brand. I think it's one of my favorite cases. Her name is Sarah, if I'm not mistaken. I saw her a while ago, and I was very inspired by the impact mentality she has. Coconut is a cosmetic, vegan-friendly brand. They don't test on animals. And I remember listening to her and listening to her speak about how she had to get into debt, pay salaries with her credit card to make ends meet when she was starting. Now she has, it has grown and it has a good revenue and all of that. And at one point, Unilever came to buy the brand from her, right? And I think the message that stuck with me when I heard her speak about her journey in wanting to be very firm with her mission, she talked about the idea of David and Goliath. And she was like, I'm going to be in my mission. I'm going to be pursuing this. Even if somebody bigger wants to come and buy me, I don't have a price. That is a value and a type of kind of like entrepreneurial activism that I admire a lot, and that gives me a lot of hope. It shows me that there's possibility to perhaps, if you're part of a system that is not working, you have to sometimes step away and then create your own thing, create your own opportunities and create your own path and trailblaze it. And I love this example because it really shows you that even like a tiny little brand that is not so tiny anymore can stand up to a Unilever and say, you know what, you want to buy me because you are selling the other one with aluminium that is creating all of these kinds of diseases, and I'm actually doing the talk. What are you going to do with me? No. You and I are on different sides of the coin, and I'm standing up for my mission. So I don't know if you have any other of these examples that create an inspiration in you. This one particular to me gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah. Just to give an example, a current example, which isn't giving me inspiration, but it's basically the same thing that happened, but the company has gone ahead and been bought by Unilever.
They did sell it.
So they did. Did they sell the
coconut?
No.
No, she's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So for this one, they did.
Standing her ground.
Yeah, good. So it happened in the UK. So there's a deodorant brand called Wild. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's sustainable deodorant.
Yeah.
They're really, amazing what they're doing. They have a good following as well. And they recently announced they were going to be bought by Unilever, and it did go through, I think, even a few months ago, very recently. So I completely get what you're saying, because Unilever are huge, and it's, if they buy one of these small startups, how can they keep their authenticity and their brand? So I'm really intrigued with Wild. I don't want to be too skeptical about it. I'm going to take a step back and see what happens, but I'm really interested to see if they do keep their mission, if they do stay authentic to their brand, or will they be kind of swallowed up by the Unilever giants?
Vortex.
And so that would be one example to keep an eye out for. An example that has inspired me for brands that are doing really well. So there's a company called Tony's Chocolonely. I think a lot of people know them.
Dutch.
Yeah. They are doing great things. So they are fighting slavery in the chocolate industry and child labor.
But that became because someone called them out. They didn't know where their cacao was coming from. And then he was like, holy shit, I have to go look and understand this through, right? So there's a whole story also.
Yeah, there's a whole story behind it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It basically started because of a case of child labor, which then generated this brand to turn things around and have a positive impact. So it's a really inspiring story and really interesting. So I'd recommend all listeners to have a look at them. And that they keep on, they're still going, they're still authentic to their mission. And obviously you still need to keep an eye out. And, also brands aren't perfect. They will make mistakes. I think a lot of times we do make brands accountable for their actions, which 100%, as you said, we do need to be activists as well. But we also need to understand that no one's perfect. So it's one to keep an eye out for, but I definitely feel inspired by them, and they were one of the first brands that inspired me to continue this journey.
Before we go to our closing reflections, there's something that I wanted to touch base with you, which is, for a long time we lacked ways in which we could measure, and still do. We still are discussing metrics and how we evaluate how sustainable or what are the ESG efforts of a company or not. So we created all of this certifications and all of these stamps in a way or another. So the B Corp, for example, is one of them, and there are many others. But we've also seen that they have been questioned recently, and a lot of them they're always going through reevaluation. What's your take on certifications? How do you see their role? And what is the change that you wish that they would have moving forward, so we could maybe see them still as something useful for us? And should a brand rely on them?
Yeah, really interesting question. With certifications, they are good because, as I said, with consumers, especially when you're in a supermarket, it only takes you a few seconds to decide what you're buying. So if you've got an easy label on there, you can understand, okay, this is a good product which is having a positive impact, this one isn't. So they're good in that respect, but I would say when they do become too mainstream, like what's happening with B Corp at the moment, I'd argue they do have a lot of brands which are a bit more questionable. I would say it doesn't really make that much of a difference anymore, because if every brand is certified sustainable, then how do we know which ones to choose and which not? So my main takeaway would be we really need to up our standards for certifications, especially now that we have so much more data and knowledge around sustainability and ESG topics. I think we can do much better. And not rely only on certification. Also as brands, don't do it just for the certificate, do it because you want to. And that ties in with the authenticity piece again. If you want to be an authentic brand, you're not just being sustainable for regulation or for a certification, you're doing it for long-term impact.
Of course. Yeah, my take on it is if we're all B Corps, then B Corps should become stricter and it should become harder, because then it means that maybe we're all reaching goals and we should have higher goals. So just make it harder and then re-certify everyone, and just like, okay, if the bar is here and we've all reached it, maybe we should put the bar here now so people could reach 100%. It, you know? So just take it away from whoever is not reaching the new goals, and that's it.
Yeah, I think there's another important point here, which is regulation. I know there's a coming regulation, I think it's this year, that is going to start controlling who is bullshitting and who's not. What can you say about that? Because I think that is a little bit tied to, hey, not everybody can have the certificate. Wait a minute, you know, like you're not sustainable. Your packaging is made in China, and then you're promoting it as something else. What do you think will happen? What do you think in terms of regulation and in terms of actually establishing some control as to and keeping accountability, keeping brands and companies accountable?
Yeah, there's a lot of ESG regulations out there, and as you said, more and more upcoming. One big one, particularly for greenwashing, is the EU Green Claims Directive, which is a great guidance for brands to understand what is greenwashing and what isn't. As you asked me at the beginning of the podcast, what actually is greenwashing? A lot of people don't understand because they don't come from a sustainability background. So it's really important for these regulations and guidelines to exist. Another one is CSRD, which is more related to sustainability reporting. So you need to report on your impacts, not only financial impacts, but also your impacts on human rights, on environment. So I would say regulations are really good for making sure that businesses are staying in line and they are complying and they're not greenwashing. However, on the other side, I'd also say that if you, similar to what I was saying with certificates and the authenticity piece, don't just do it for the regulation, you know, do it because you want to. So yeah, I think they're really good for keeping, holding companies accountable, but there are other ways around it as well.
Okay, we're getting to a truth-telling moment. Time for what we call our truth-telling moment. No filters, no professional veneer. We want you to expose something that most of your professional peers would never admit publicly. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Number one, what is the most significant lie that the sustainability communication industry tells itself?
Tricky question. I would say that the biggest lie that the sustainability communication industry, or more likely sustainability industry, tells itself is that carbon is the sole focus of sustainability. There's a lot of focus on carbon, on reaching net zero, on carbon emissions. It is really important, but I would say we need to take a systemic approach and we can't have tunnel vision just for carbon. I think also it's connected with the ego mentality and the tech mindset. There's a lot of carbon tech out there, which is doing amazing and great stuff. But there's a lot of other really important initiatives also related to the social side of ESG, so environmental social governance. You should also focus on human rights, on positive labor. So yeah, I think there's too much focus on one area sometimes, and we need to have more of a open vision and systemic approach.
All right, number two. What uncomfortable truth are you wrestling with that keeps you up at night?
something that's maybe not keeping me up at night, but something that's worrying me. And I think
glad to know that there's nothing keeping you up.
I have very peaceful night sleeps. Something that, is worrying me and worrying most people, I believe, is the current geopolitical landscape. There's been a lot of backtracking on sustainability initiatives. A lot of the narrative is turning from sustainability to resilience. I would argue they go together, but obviously there's some parts of resilience that don't necessarily have so much of a positive impact, especially if you're looking at short-term resilience.
What's the difference? Can you explain that so people that...
Yeah, so from my point of view, resilience is focusing on how to keep your business alive no matter what, whereas sustainability is that, but with a positive impact, or at least that's where the narrative is at the moment. So I would say we're backtracking a lot in sustainability. It's not being spoken about that much anymore. A lot of regulations are being dropped or amended. Even the CSRD one that I mentioned earlier, they have done a tweak called the Omnibus, which they've kind of loosened the regulation slightly. So that's what worries me, is where are we going? Why are we going backwards? We need to go
And
forwards.
that all is a response to some political and some economic positions that some of the leaders that we have right now are making, right?
Yes, indeed.
Loosening up here and loosening up there, so we keep other people happy. And we don't lose a lot of money in our country.
Ego.
Yay.
Exactly. All right, number 3. If you could completely dismantle one deeply entrenched belief in your industry, what would that one be?
I would say something that we believe at the moment, which has a lot of truth in it, but I think also we should reshift our mindset slightly, is about how we work with the big guys, with the corporates. There's an element which is around activism and boycotting, which, as we said earlier, we need that. We need all sorts of stakeholders and people in society involved in change. But there's also a side that needs people to be in these companies, or at least to work with them from an outsider perspective, to help them make that shift. Because if they're left to do nothing, then they're just going to carry on doing what they do. Obviously, as consumers, if you stop shopping from these brands, then you'll have a really good impact, because there's less demand, as we mentioned earlier. But I would say, as a sustainability professional, you really need to approach these big corporates, question what they're doing, challenge them. If you simply ignore them, they're just going to carry on doing what they do. And if they are having a negative impact on the planet, they'll continue doing that. So that would be my main one.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. It's been amazing to hear from you. Thank you for your experience, your narratives, and for everything that you have shared with us today.
Yes. I think that your story and your beliefs resonate a lot with us, because I think that you are always questioning not yourself, but also the market, and actually helping brands and people communicate, not just communicate better, but maybe have a little bit of more understanding of how they actually can create impact. And I salute you for it. So thank you so much for being bold, for speaking so nicely about all these topics. I hope that we can see a lot of your work moving forward. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And you can find more about Sarah in the comments and in the links that we're going to post here. And we challenge our listeners, take one thing from this conversation and turn it into action, whether it's questioning a brand's sustainability claims, rethinking your own communication strategy, or simply sharing this story with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. That was Sarah Heaney. Subscribe to our channels. One more edition of Impact Beyond Profit. If that conversation didn't light a fire in you, I don't know what will. We'll keep them coming to you until the next one. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Letty.
Thank
until
you.
the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.